wasn't a gift. It was a piece of her, a coil of black hair and a small patch of scalp. The note said it was the most beautiful part, but now something is moving, deep under the skin. The ribbon was the first thing I saw. That particular red, the color of blood that has had time to darken on a surface, tied into a bow that sat slightly lopsided on the left side. I stood in the doorway of the building, the morning cold pressed at the back of my neck. I looked at the box, sitting centered on the concrete threshold, picked it up and carried it inside, without breaking stride. Again, Iris said from the couch. She said it with the evenness she brought to most things. Her knees pulled to her chest, both hands wrapped around her morning coffee, pale hair still loose from sleep. She watched me carry the box to the kitchen counter with an expression that was careful and still. I pulled the ribbon loose. I folded back the paper. Inside the white box, coiled at the bottom, was a length of hair, very long, very black, the strands lying flat against each other with the kind of neatness that requires patience and repeated handling, arranged in a smooth coil, like something sleeping, and before I had even touched it, I was already cold, because this had not been gathered casually, not in haste. Someone had sat somewhere with this hair between their fingers and done this slowly, the way you handle something you consider worth handling with care. I lifted it from the box. I turned it over in my hands. At the root end, where the hair had been separated from whatever head it had belonged to, there was a small patch of scalp, the size of a coin, dried to the color of old leather, the edges pulled slightly inward and raised, the way skin raises when it has been peeled away from something over time, rather than cut from it cleanly, when the separation has been achieved through sustained and patient pressure, rather than through any single, decisive act. The kitchen light hummed above me. The refrigerator ran its low, continuous sound. Outside the window, someone on the street was talking on a phone, the voice too distant to make out words, but close enough to register as human sound, as evidence of a world moving normally past the glass. I stood at the counter and held the thing in both hands and did not move. At the bottom of the box, beneath where the hair had lain, there was a square of folded paper. The handwriting was small and very even, each letter formed with the same slight downward pressure, the lines perfectly level, in a way that suggested the writer had taken their time, had perhaps written this out more than once, before settling on the final version. This is the most beautiful part of her, but it is not as beautiful as you. We need to call the police, Iris said, from close behind me. I had not heard her cross the room. When I turned, she was standing near enough that I could see the small crease between her eyebrows. She was looking at me with an expression that was focused and direct and uncomplicated, and she had said we, not you should, not you need to, but we, as though the weight of this already belonged to both of us. And I held onto the word the way you hold onto something warm when the room has gone cold around you. Yes, I said, we should. The police took the box, wrote a name in a notebook, and told me 3 days later that there was not sufficient evidence to proceed. I thanked the detective, set my phone down on the kitchen table, sat looking at it for a moment, and then I got up, made coffee, and went on with the afternoon. The first dream came on a Tuesday, for days after the box. I was in my bedroom, in the specific half-dark that comes when the streetlight outside pushes through the gap in the curtain. That orange-gray light that renders familiar shapes slightly uncertain at their edges, that makes the wardrobe look taller than it is, and the chair in the corner look further away than it should. Everything in the room was exactly where it belonged. The wardrobe, the chair, the window, the ceiling, all exactly right. and I lay in my bed and looked at the room with the particular stillness of a person whose body has understood something before their mind has caught up to it. The thing was standing in the corner, between the wardrobe and the wall. It had the height and general width of a person. Its hair was long and dark, and fell forward over its face, so that I could not see its features. Its arms hung at its sides. For one long suspended moment, it was simply a figure standing in a corner. Strange, but not yet terrible. I lay still and looked at it, and my body had not yet decided what to do. And then I registered the knees. They bent the wrong way, not dramatically, not at a violent angle, but with a precise and deliberate reversal. The direction that knees are not built to accommodate. The direction that requires the leg to become something other than what a leg is, so that the lower legs angled forward, while the upper legs went back, and the figure stood in the corner, as though this were simply how it stood, as though the geometry of it were entirely unremarkable. Its neck was tilted at a degree that would require the spine inside it to have rearranged its components into an order they were never designed to hold. And the whole of it was absolutely motionless. Not the motionlessness of a person who has stopped moving, but the motionlessness of a thing that does not need to breathe, and therefore has no reason to shift, or settle, or make any of the small involuntary movements that living bodies make. I woke up with the bedside lamp burning, my back pressed against the headboard, both hands gripping the sheets below me. I had no memory of reaching for the switch, or sitting upright, and the corner between the wardrobe and the wall held nothing except the ordinary accumulation of dust along the baseboard. I sat there until the gray outside went thin with early morning. Then Iris knocked softly and asked through the door if I wanted coffee. I said yes. And by the time I sat across from her at the kitchen table, with the mug warm between my palms and the yellow light of the apartment around me, I had arranged the night into something I could set aside. I sat across from her at the kitchen table with the mug warm between my palms. A week after the dream, I was standing at the bathroom sink, washing my face before bed, the water cold against my hands the way I preferred it, the overhead light doing what it does to skin at this hour, flattening it, making it slightly more clinical than you generally want your own face to appear. I was thinking about nothing in particular. The chapter 1 needed to finish before Thursday. The call I had been putting off to my sister for 3 weeks. I had nearly finished washing my face when I saw the vein. It was beneath my right eye, following the lower orbital bone. A thin branching line, the color of a bruise in its very earliest stage, before the purple has fully committed to the surface. I leaned toward the mirror and studied it, then raised my index finger and pressed it gently against the skin there, just below the bone, the way you press a bruise to determine whether the color is real or a trick of the light. The skin yielded beneath my finger, not dramatically, not in a way that would alarm you if you were watching from outside. A small softness, a slight giving way in that one contained spot, the feeling of tissue that has lost some of the firmness of the bone behind it. And then, while my finger was still pressed flat against my cheekbone, something pressed back. It was slow, and it was deliberate, and it came from beneath the skin, from the narrow space between the surface and the bone, and it held against my fingertip with a steadiness that had nothing in common with a pulse. Nothing of the rhythmic push and release of blood moving through a vein. This was a single sustained pressure, even and patient, the feeling of something resting its full attention against the point of contact between us, something aware that my finger was there, and choosing to push back against it. The faucet was still running. The pipes in the wall ticked. From the kitchen, the refrigerator cycled on with its low electrical hum. The ordinary sound of the apartment doing what it always did at this hour. The sounds of a night proceeding normally, in every direction, except the one directly in front of me. I pulled my finger away from my face. I stood at the sink and looked at my reflection, and waited for my breathing to settle. And then I pressed my finger against the vein a second time, because I needed to be certain. The skin gave way again. The pressure came again, from the other side, and this time I stood absolutely still, and I watched the mirror, with the concentrated attention of someone trying to catch a thing, in the act of being real, and I watched my reflection's hand lift slowly from where it hung at its side, and press its palm flat against the inside of the glass. My hand was on my face. It had not moved. My reflection stood on the other side of the mirror, its palm against the surface, fingers slightly spread, pressing outward from within the glass, and it turned its head very slowly, no more than 15 degrees, and looked at a point above and behind my left shoulder, at the upper corner of the mirror, with the calm and unhurried attention of something that has heard a sound and is taking its time, locating the source. I turned around. The bathroom doorway opened onto the dark hallway. The hallway was empty. The apartment beyond it was completely silent. Nothing moved anywhere within my range of vision. I turned back to the mirror. The mirror showed me only myself, both hands at my sides, the bathroom unchanged behind me, the overhead light steady, the water still running cold into the basin. I turned the tap off. I stood at the sink and looked at my reflection for a long moment, at the ordinary face with the faint vein beneath the right eye, at the hands resting at its sides, and my reflection looked back at me with the patience of something that understood it had been seen, and was waiting to see what I would do with that. I dried my face, turned off the light, walked down the hallway to my room, got into bed, and lay in the dark with my eyes open. And I did not think about what I had seen, which is different from not knowing what I had seen. And it is also different from not knowing what to do with it. He found me on a Wednesday afternoon, in the back section of the university library, between the periodicals shelf and the long study tables, where the afternoon light came through high windows in flat columns, and made the dust in the air visible. I knew before he pulled out the chair across from me that he had not arrived there by accident, which meant he had either followed me from the building or he had known my schedule well enough to predict where I would be. At 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, I considered both of these possibilities, and let neither of them show on my face. He looked bad in the quiet way, not the kind of bad that announces itself with drama, but the kind that builds in small daily increments until the body stops recovering from it and begins instead to accommodate it. The shadows beneath his eyes, the permanent darkening of someone who has stopped sleeping properly, the jacket with the particular carelessness of something taken from the floor rather than from a hanger, and there was a smell about him, faint but present, the sour warm smell of a body that had gone several days without being properly washed. But it was his face that made me stop, along the line of his jaw, following it upward past the ear toward the temple. The veins had surfaced through the skin, not simply darkened or more prominent, but a full branching network, a dense map of channels pressing upward from below, in a blue-purple that was nearly black at the center of each line, and faded to bruised gray at its edges. And they were not still. They were moving, each thread shifting its course beneath the surface, with the slow and patient deliberateness of roots working through soil, finding new channels, pressing outward into available tissue, and the skin above them lifted with the movement, in low ridges that traveled an inch and then subsided, and then rose again, in a slightly different configuration, continuous and unhurried, the behavior of something that has been at this for a long time. He pushed his sleeve back to the elbow, without being asked. The veins on his forearm were worse, a dense and shifting map covering the full length from wrist to the bend of the elbow, and one of them, thick enough that the skin above it rose visibly, rolled toward the outside of his wrist and pressed upward against the surface, with enough force that I could see the ridge of lifted skin from across the table, a half-inch of raised tissue, traveling slowly toward his thumb. Before the pressure subsided, and it sank back, and was still for a moment, and then began moving again, in a different direction, rerouting itself, with the same unhurried patience as before. "I did a ritual," he said, and he said it with the flatness of someone who has rehearsed the sentence, until the embarrassment of it has been worn completely away. "A love charm. I know how that sounds. I followed the instructions, and something went wrong. And whatever went wrong is doing this to me. And I think—" He stopped. He looked at me across the table with the particular look he had always had, the look I had once mistaken for intimacy, and he said more quietly, "You've been making your own coffee in the mornings. You stopped letting anyone give you anything. You've been doing that for at least 2 weeks, and you haven't told anyone why." The library hummed around us. Someone typed at a table nearby. Cart rolled down an aisle somewhere behind me. "I noticed things about you," he said. "I always have. That's not nothing, Elena. Even if everything else has been wrong, that part isn't nothing." I looked at him for a moment, at the moving lines in his skin, and the exhausted face above them. I picked up my folder and my bag, and I stood. "Don't contact me again," I said, in the voice of a person having an ordinary conversation in a library, and I walked to the exit, pushed through the heavy door, into the cold afternoon, and stood with my back against the brick wall outside, and waited for my heart rate to return to something I could work with. Above me, a string of dead leaves moved in the gutter. A cyclist passed on the street without looking up. I took out my phone and called Iris. She answered on the second ring, and by the time I reached the apartment building, I had put everything into a shape I could carry. It was 11 days after the library. I had been making my own coffee for 9 of those days. The vein beneath my right I had stopped thickening, and the sound I had been hearing in the deepest part of the night, that faint wet shifting, from somewhere very close to me, from a location that seemed to be inside the tissue of my own face. It had receded to a frequency I could only perceive when the apartment was completely silent, and even then, I was no longer certain of it. I was at the bathroom sink at 11:15, the cold water running over my hands, the overhead light flat and white, thinking about nothing in particular, whether I needed to return a library book before Friday, whether the weather would hold through the weekend, when the surface of my left cheek moved. Not the vein this time, the skin itself, a broad, slow movement beneath the surface, traveling from the line of my jaw upward toward my cheekbone, and the skin above it lifted with the movement, a low, smooth ridge, crossing my face, the way a swell crosses deep water, after something very large has passed beneath it. The ridge reached my cheekbone, and held there for a moment. The skin tented slightly upward from the bone, and then it subsided, and settled flat, and my face was my face again, unchanged, and still. I did not move. The faucet ran. The pipes in the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed from the kitchen, cycling through its ordinary rhythms. The sounds of the apartment proceeding normally, in every room, except this one. And underneath all of those sounds, underneath the water and the pipes and the refrigerator and the distant hum of the building itself, a sound that came from within the immediate space of my own face, from the skin of my left cheek, a sound that was soft and wet and lasted no more than 2 seconds. The sound of something shifting its position inside a small and confined space, of a body that has been very still for a long time, making a small and careful adjustment, settling more deeply into the room available to it. And when it stopped, the bathroom was so quiet that the silence felt inhabited, in a way that silence is not supposed to feel. My hands were gripping the edges of the sink. My face was my face, and then my reflection's right hand lifted from its side and pressed its palm flat against the inside of the glass. My hand was on the sink. My hand had not moved. My reflection stood on the other side, its palm against the surface between us, and it looked directly at me, not at the corner, not at a point behind me, but at me, at my eyes, through the glass. The expression on its face was mine in every specific feature and proportion. The same mouth, the same brow, the same line of the jaw, and it was not an expression I had ever made, or ever felt cross my face. It held my gaze with the patience of something that has been waiting in one place for a very long time, and has recently understood that its waiting is nearly finished. I looked at it for a long moment, at my own face wearing an expression I had never put there, at the palm still pressed flat against the inside of the glass. And then I nodded, once, the small careful nod of someone acknowledging the terms of an arrangement they have not yet agreed to, but are no longer pretending they haven't heard. The reflection lowered its hand slowly. I reached out and turned the light off. The bathroom went completely dark. I stood in the dark, and I counted to 10, and I did not close my eyes, because closing my eyes felt like a mistake I could not afford. The dark was full and even on all sides. The only sounds were the pipe in the wall, and the refrigerator in the kitchen, and my own breathing, which I was making a deliberate effort to keep slow. When I reached 10, I turned the light back on. The mirror showed me at the sink, one hand still on the light switch. My face was my face. The bathroom was a bathroom. The overhead light hummed steadily. The water ran cold over the hand I had not moved from the edge of the basin. And the only thing in any of it that was wrong was the expression my reflection had been wearing before the light went out. That patience, that quality of having arrived. I stood and looked at myself for a long moment. Then I dried my hands, went to the kitchen, stood at the counter, and drank a glass of water in the dark. I did not turn on the kitchen light. I did not need to see anything else that night. I was looking for the spare keys on a Sunday morning, while the sound of the shower came through the bathroom wall. The specific sound of water hitting tile at a constant pressure. The sound that meant Iris would be occupied for at least another 10 minutes. The cabinet above the refrigerator was where she kept small useful things, spare batteries and takeout menus, the random objects that accumulate in a shared apartment over time. I opened it and found the keys on their small hook, exactly where they should have been. Behind the keys, arranged in a careful line along the back of the cabinet shelf, were 8 small glass bottles, each one stoppered with a cork, each one holding a fine white powder, with the faint warm undertone of something organic, the consistency of ground bone, or very fine cornstarch. On each bottle, a small label in Iris's handwriting, the same slight backward slant I knew from grocery lists on the refrigerator door, the same even pressure on the downstrokes, and on each label, written in the format of day and month, a date. The earliest date was the 4th of October. I had moved in with Iris in August. I stood at the open cabinet with the keys in my hand, and I listened to the water running in the bathroom, and I did not move. The kitchen smelled of the coffee that had just finished brewing on the counter behind me, the coffee that Iris had set to run before she got into the shower, the coffee that would be waiting for me when she came out. The apartment was warm and clean. The morning light was coming through the kitchen window, in a way that made the whole room look like something from a photograph of an ordinary life. And I stood in the middle of all of it, with 8 small bottles in front of me, and the keys in my hand. I took the keys from their hook. I closed the cabinet door. I stood in the middle of the kitchen for a moment. Then I walked to my room, closed the door behind me, and sat on the edge of my bed. 3 days earlier, while Iris had been out, and the apartment had been empty, and I had had the afternoon entirely to myself, I had placed a small white box in the back of that cabinet, behind where the bottles now sat. I had put it there 3 days ago. I took out my phone and opened a new message, and I began to write, choosing each word with the care of someone who understands that the words will do work that cannot be undone. The shower ran on in the bathroom. Outside, a car moved slowly down the wet street. The morning light lay in a long pale rectangle across the bedroom floor. I finished the message, read it once, and sent it. I set the phone face down on the bedspread, and I waited. He arrived in under an hour. I heard the front door open, and Iris's voice, low and even, and then Lucas's voice, and then the sounds moved down the hallway. 2 sets of footsteps, and then one. The bathroom door opened and closed, and then the sounds stopped, and the silence that followed had a different weight from the silence that had come before it. The heavier and more permanent quality of a silence in which something has been completed. I sat on the edge of my bed, and I counted to 60 with care, each number given its full second, and then I got up and walked down the hallway and put my hand on the bathroom door and pushed it open. The cold reached me before anything else, a sharp animal cold. The kind of cold that comes from something that has been warm recently and is warm no longer. And the smell reached me at the same moment, copper, and something older underneath it, something damp and close. The smell of the inside of things that are not generally exposed to air. Lucas was standing at the sink, his back to me, both hands on the edge of the basin, his head dropped forward, his shoulders very still. The water in the basin was running, and it was the pale pink of something diluted. On the tile floor near the base of the cabinet, there was a dark smear at the edge of the grout line, and the mirror above the sink had a crack running through it. From the upper left corner to the center, straight and clean, the geometry of a single point of impact, at a single moment, a force applied once, and completely, the crack had passed directly through the center of where a reflection's face would have been. Lucas heard me and turned around. The movement was slow and effortful, the movement of someone whose body has gone very heavy. His face had the color of old wax, and the particular blankness of a person whose mind has moved ahead to a place it cannot yet fully inhabit. His hands, when he lifted them from the edge of the basin, were shaking with a fine continuous tremor that he did not appear to notice. The veins along his jaw had stopped moving. They were dark and fixed beneath his skin, no longer traveling or rerouting, no longer lifting the surface in their slow, deliberate ridges. Simply there, a dense permanent map pressed close to the surface, like something that had finished its work and gone still. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice had the texture of something that had been submerged and was only now surfacing. "I came because you said, I thought, I didn't mean for it to." He stopped, looked at his hands, then looked at me. "Call the police," I said. He looked at me across the small cold space of the bathroom. I looked back at him, and I kept my face exactly where it was. "Tell them you came because you were worried," I said. "Tell them you found something had happened. Tell them you don't know the details." He took his phone from his jacket pocket, looked at it, then looked at me. I did not look away. He began to dial. When someone answered, I walked back down the hallway to the living room, sat down on the couch, pulled the blanket from the armrest over my shoulders, looked at the window and the dark street outside it, and waited. The police came at 2:30. asked their questions in the flat procedural manner of people who have asked these questions many times. I answered them in the order they were asked. Lucas stood to my left and confirmed what he had found when he arrived, which was true. He did not elaborate on the context of his arrival or the nature of the message that had brought him here. The officers wrote in their notepads, told me that someone would follow up, that I should not hesitate to contact them if I felt unsafe. I thanked them. They left. The door closed. The apartment went quiet. Lucas sat across from me in the living room, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on them, and I watched him, and I thought about what he had said in the library. "You've been making your own coffee. You stopped letting anyone give you anything. I noticed things about you. That part isn't nothing." I thought about the specific quality of attention that had always been the most dangerous thing about him. The way it could feel when directed at you, like being genuinely seen, rather than carefully studied. The veins along his jaw were dark and still beneath his skin, the network of them fixed like old scarring. He looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than the surface of the face. The exhaustion of someone whose body has been doing something strenuous for a long time, without his knowledge or permission. I looked down at my own wrist resting on my knee. The veins beneath the skin there were still moving, that slow, continuous rerouting, threading through available tissue, finding new channels, with the same patient deliberateness I had been watching for weeks, but quietly now, without urgency, with the even and unhurried quality of something that has arrived where it intended to arrive and has begun the process of making itself at home. I pressed my fingertip against one of the moving lines. It stopped, curved slowly around the pad of my finger, the skin above it tenting slightly with the upward pressure from below. And then it relaxed and sank back and continued in its original direction. And I held my finger there and watched it and did not pull away. It moved the way something moves when it is tolerating contact, rather than welcoming it, cooperative, for now, for reasons of its own. And I kept my finger there, and it kept moving around it. And we remained like that for a moment, the two of us, in the quiet of the living room, 3 in the morning, neither of us pulling away. "I should have believed you sooner," I said, and I let the words reach Lucas the way they needed to, with enough weight that he would carry them, that he would return to them in the weeks and months after this night, and find that they required something from him, that they created an obligation, an ongoing debt, that could only be serviced through continued proximity to the person who had said them. He exhaled. The tension in his shoulders shifted. He nodded once, carefully. His eyes, when he looked up at me, were red at the edges, and full of the specific gratitude of someone who has been offered more than they believe they deserve. When he stood to leave, he said he would check in tomorrow. I said that would be good. I closed the door and stood in the quiet of the apartment. And after a moment, I walked to the kitchen and opened the cabinet above the refrigerator and reached past the row of small glass bottles, past the 4th of October, the 12th, the 21st, all the small careful dates in Iris's handwriting. And I took down the box from where I had placed it 3 days ago. White box, brown paper, a ribbon the color of dried blood, tied in a bow that I had straightened until it sat right. I set it on the counter and stood back and looked at it under the kitchen light. There was no name on the outside, no address, no indication of who it was for or who it was from, just the paper and the ribbon and the clean white edge of the box beneath. Under the skin of my wrist, something moved and settled and went still. I reached out and adjusted the bow on the left side, where it had gone slightly crooked, and when it was straight, I turned the kitchen light off and went to bed. In the morning, the box was still on the counter, the ribbon perfectly even on both sides. Outside, the street was gray and cold and ordinary. On the doorstep of the building, in the center of the threshold, where a box might be left by someone who knew the address and had taken their time with the wrapping, there was nothing. Not yet.